I'm used to speaking in New England without the mic. We're not going to look at the entire, issue there with Pergamos, but we're just looking at the counsel that God gave to Pergamos. And to review, if you weren't here on the one about Ephesus, we're looking at the applications of the messages to the 7 churches, because there's more than one. The first application is they explain the condition of 7 literal churches in John's day. So they were written especially for the condition of that particular church. But also, they have a historical reference. And it actually starts with the church that Jesus started and goes all the way to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As you go through the 7 churches, so there's a historical condition of the church from apostolic times to now. But one of the mistakes that gets made is that people think that it's only Laodicea that's talking about the condition of the church. So that's not correct. The third is the condition of every individual church today could be represented by one of those 7. And then it comes even closer home. The condition of every individual in the Adventist church is represented by one of these churches. So there's a lot of prayer that needs to go in when we realize that the message of these 7 churches apply today. They apply through history, and they apply, of course, to certain ones when it was written. So the part that we're going to study today is verses 14 to 16. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam. Now imagine everyone at least remembers part of the story of Balaam. We'll look at some of it. Who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. So 2 big problems. The church was more or less aware, probably, that these individuals were in the church, but they weren't doing anything about it. And he adds this, which thing I hate. So repent, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. Maybe I need it to be changed where it's only one. It's too small and I can't read it good enough. Just one screen. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Now I want you to notice the reason we can apply it much wider is because every time it says churches, it doesn't say church. So it wasn't just for the church of Pergamos, it was for all the churches. And so that's true today. It's for all the churches. And as we get more into it, I think you'll be able to see very clearly that this particular message does apply in a much broader sense. So till they get that going, I'm going to read from up here. The story of Balaam is in Numbers 22 and onward, and we're just going to pick a few things. The background is the children of Israel were marching on the eastern side of Jordan. They were heading north to where they could cross the Jordan River and go in for the second time into the land of Canaan. So they came to this country of Moab. And the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand, and they came unto Balaam. And he said unto them, Lodge here this night, and I will bring you word again, as the Lord shall speak unto me. Now, Balaam had been a true prophet of God, but he had gotten messed up. And we'll see what it was that messed him up. And so people thought, if he puts a curse on Israel, then they won't be able to conquer us. So that's why Balak sent that out. But when the messengers got there, he still had enough of his understanding about God that he didn't just say, oh, I'll come. He said, I better pray about this. And God said unto Balaam, Thou shalt not go with them, thou shalt not curse the people, for they are blessed. So, as these men came, he prayed, and God gave him a direct order. He said, no. So this time, he did what God said. Oh. Now you won't be able to read it, sorry. All right, you'll have to just listen well. So the message, of course, came back to Balak. And he was really unhappy because just before this, Israel had conquered everybody that they encountered. They tried to go peaceably, some of them, by their country. And their army, the enemy's army, came out to stop them. And when they engaged in battle, he wiped them out. And some of these were giants. They were the ones that those spies had been scared about. So next we read from Numbers 22, 15 to 17. And Balak sent yet again princes, more and more honorable than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, Thus saith Balak, Let nothing, I pray thee, hinder thee from coming unto me. For I will promote thee unto very great honor. Oh, Balak really thought that was a good idea. And I will do whatsoever thou sayest unto me. Essentially, he is saying, name your price. I sent you a rich reward last time, and it must not have been enough. So this time, name your price. How much do you want to come and do it? Most people have a price. If you pay enough, they'll do something they shouldn't do if you pay enough money. So Satan knows that, and he knew about Balaam as well. So then the message finished, "Come therefore, I pray thee, curse me, this people." In verse 20, we read, "And God came unto Balaam at night, and said unto him, If the men come to call thee, rise up and go with them. But yet the word which I shall say unto thee, that shalt thou do." Now, we didn't read the whole story, but the men had been sent home once when he wanted to pray. They were smart enough to realize he's going to get the same message. So they took off early, and notice the way God worded it. He said, "If they come for you." Well, they didn't come for him. God was telling him, don't go. But because of the problem that he had in his heart, which was covetousness, he coveted honor, he coveted the money, especially the money, but really both of them. His mind was not able to think correctly. And notice what it says here in the 4th volume of Spiritual Gifts. "The messengers of Balak did not call upon him in the morning to have him go with them. They were annoyed with his delay and expected a second refusal. Balaam could have excused himself and easily avoided going. He could have said, "Balak, I told them I had to pray and they didn't stay, so that's why I'm not coming." But he thought, now notice how his mind was messed up. But he thought that because the Lord the second time did not forbid his going, he would go and overtake the ambassadors of Balak. Have you ever heard anybody say, "Well, God doesn't say you can't do it"? Well, that was the reasoning that Balaam had. But the reason for it was the condition of his heart, so covetous of those gifts that he wanted. Well, you know the story. He started going to catch up with them, and he runs into a problem with the donkey. And so the donkey finally turns out of the path and goes into the field, and the donkey starts talking to him. But notice how twisted up Balaam was. The speaking of the beast was unnoticed. He didn't know the donkey was talking to him. By him, it was unnoticed by him as anything remarkable, for he was blinded by passion. So he was so wrapped up in his desire to get that promotion and to get that money, he didn't even recognize he was talking to a donkey. That's certainly a lesson for those that have this problem, right? Now, in Numbers 22:35, we read, "And the angel of the Lord said unto Balaam, Go with the men." This is after the donkey talked to him. Said, "Go ahead with the men, but only the word that I shall speak unto thee, that thou shalt speak." So 3 times, well, twice at least, he's been told the same message. And so he goes on. And he gets there, but he's forced to say blessings. Now, why did God have to do all that? It was important to Israel to overcome the Moabites. They were a wicked group of people. They had to be dispossessed in order to overcome the inhabitants of Canaan. After the angel had impressively warned Balaam against gratifying the Moabites, he gave him permission to pursue his journey. God would glorify his name, even though the presumptuous Balaam the presumptuous Balaam before the enemies of Israel. So God gave a powerful message to the Moabites. Don't tangle with the Israelites. God's blessing is on them. This could not be done in a more effectual manner than by showing them that a man of Balaam's covetous disposition dared not, for any promises of promotion or rewards, pronounce a curse upon Israel. Now, what they didn't know is he couldn't. He wasn't allowed. But they realized, wow, they really are blessed. There's nothing we can do. You know, later there was a group of people called the Gibeonites. And if the Moabites had done what the Gibeonites did, they might have been preserved. But, you know, they were so wicked there was no chance they would do that. Well, since we're talking about Balaam, he went back home, but he was not happy. Balaam could think of nothing but the reward. Every day, I don't know how long, every day he was thinking, how can I get that reward? I got to have that money in that position. Balaam could think of nothing but the reward and promotion to honor which he might have received of Balak, until he was willing to resort to any means to obtain that which he desired. So he started racking his brain. How can I get that money? Now, I think if he had been thinking about Daniel, you know, Daniel was offered a high position, lots of money, because he interpreted the writing on the wall. But that very night, Babylon was overthrown. So what good would that have done him? None at all. Well, the same was true of Balaam, but he didn't think about that. All he could think about was the money. Balaam knew that the prosperity of Israel depended upon their observance of the law of God, and that there was no way to bring a curse upon them but by seducing them to transgression. So he said, I know how we can do it. We can get them to break God's law, and then they will not be protected anymore. And so he hatched up a plan, which we don't know the whole plan, but we know some of it. So he went back over there to Balak, and he makes this suggestion. At Balaam's suggestion, a grand festival in honor of their gods was appointed by the king of Moab, and it was secretly arranged that Balaam should induce the Israelites to attend. Great numbers of the people joined him in witnessing the festivities. They ventured upon the forbidden ground and were entangled in the snare of Satan. Now, how did they get drawn into this? Beguiled with music and dancing, and allured by the beauty of heathen vestals, they cast off their fealty to Jehovah. It's not too hard to understand what was going on over there. The kind of music that comes from Satan was being played. There was alcohol. There were women that were dressed seductively. And as a result, the trap that Balaam suggested went shut and damaged many of Israel. As they united in mirth and feasting, indulgence in wine beclouded their senses. They participated in the most degrading rites overcome by the wiles of heathen women, the rulers and the leading men were among the first to transgress. Now that's a serious thought. That the ones that led out with it were the leaders in Israel. But, I'm not saying this because I think there are people in this church like this. But I'm saying this because we have to be aware that these things are going on in the church. And that if we don't do anything about it, then the condemnation that was given is going to fall upon us for not doing anything about it. So how did he get the ball rolling and get this started? Midianitish women began to steal into the camp. Their appearance excited no alarm, and so quietly were their plans conducted that the attention of Moses was not called to the matter. So they just kind of sneaked into camp and visited many of the men, even the leaders and so on, and possibly they weren't dressed too well either as they came in. It was the object of these women in their association with the Hebrews to seduce them into transgression of the law of God, to draw their attention to heathen rites and customs and lead them into idolatry. So that was the plan. There was another part of the plan which I couldn't put all the details in, but Balaam was a prophet of God at one time. He wasn't much of one now. And so Israel had the impression he was a prophet of God. And so he helped with this, and then he sent these women in to entice the men to come over to the party that they were going to have. Now, applying this, we see that the real doctrine of Balaam is covetousness, because that was the primary motivating factor that pushed Balaam to do this. He didn't feel safe to just directly go against God, although he did in the end, because he thought about it so much. And what he was interested in is to corrupt God's people through idolatry and immorality. Now, here are some of the agencies that that the devil is using today. I just listed them. We won't spend much time on them. But pornography is doing its damage. And not everybody is clear about the sinfulness of this. Self-abuse, I looked up some statistics on how bad it is, and I was shocked at how widespread this is. Also, sexually revealing clothing is a tempter to many men, and sexual perversion. And I've even noticed a book on marriage where a professor in the Adventist church is saying that sodomy is okay. Now, of course, he doesn't use that word, but there is a behavior, if you want to look in the dictionary and see what it is, that's sodomy. And so this lets me know we do have individuals like this in the church. Now, here's where we have to come in. Are we going to be influenced by them? It's one thing to know they're there, but are we going to be influenced by them to do the things that they consider okay, but they have a reason for it? And the reason is to rob us of the eternal life that God wants to give to us. Also, Pergamos allowed members who were leading other members in the same type of conduct. So that's the real issue. That people are being permitted as church members who are breaking the same areas of covetousness or of lax lifestyle, thinking it's okay in sexual matters. Now, here's another one that really gives a warning to us. It's from the same chapter that I read earlier. As we approach the close of time, as the people of God stand upon the borders of the heavenly Canaan, Satan will, as of old, redouble his efforts to prevent them from entering the goodly land. Now, I've been in the church a long time. The amount of adultery that takes place in the Adventist church is very shameful. And I hate to admit it, I never thought it would happen at Wildwood, but it has happened here. And so this is something that we are supposed to learn from the story of Balaam and other places in the Bible, that these things are going to happen in the last days, but we are not to get involved with it. We are to stay clear of it. And if we know that somebody has been doing those kind of things and they're a member, we have to deal with it. Now, of course, we don't want to kick them out without working with them, but if we allow them to be here, then we're actually hindering the success of God's church. Back in the first reference I was reading, it says, to help us be sure that we understand this is a problem to contend with, worldly mindedness, selfishness, and covetousness have been eating out the spirituality and life of God's people. That's a pretty straight diagnosis. What needs changed in the Adventist church? The worldly mindedness needs to go out. You know, after God called us to this place, at first we were planning to leave, but it wasn't too long until we said, money is never going to be an issue in where we work for God. Whether it's small or big, it doesn't matter. We're going to go wherever He tells us to go. And I can't say there's no selfishness, but these are things we struggle with, I realize. But those three are the big problems that are hindering the success and why we've been preaching the gospel for so many years and we're still not done. In fact, we're probably not even half done taking the gospel to the world. Worldly mindedness, selfishness, and covetousness have been eating out the spirituality and life of God's people. The danger of God's people for a few years past has been the love of this world. We want to keep up with the Joneses. We want to have what other people has. And we are willing to do things that shouldn't be done to get it. That's the bottom line. Love of this world. Out of this have sprung the sins of selfishness and covetousness. So from those two things, we get a real harvest of selfishness and covetousness. And we see in the life of Balaam, that's what happened to him. It got so big, he couldn't think of anything else except how much am I going to get? The more they get of this world, the more they set their affections on it, and still they reach out for more. You know, it seems like in general, the more we have, the more we want to have. And that's what Satan is constantly trying to agitate. So, if lots of Adventists have everything that money could buy, guess what? A lot of other Adventists want the same. And so the covetousness is growing and growing. I read a statement in the book Selected Messages, and it talks about how as wages were increased, in other words, as you worked like in an Adventist hospital or some other place, as the wages were increased, guess what else increased? Covetousness. So the more money we get, the more covetous we get sometimes. And that is leading to a dead-end street if we want to go to heaven. Well, that would be enough, wouldn't it, for one church to have to contend with? But they also had the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. So what is that? Well, in the Adventist Bible Commentary, 7a, 957, the doctrine is now largely taught that the gospel of Christ has made the law of God of no effect. That by believing, we are released from the necessity of being doers of the word. But this is the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which Christ so unsparingly condemned. So they're saying you can get to heaven even if you don't obey. It's okay. He's taking care of it all. And again, is it our sin, the sin of the Nicolaitans? Well, what is that sin? Turning the grace of God into lasciviousness. That is the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. Now let's look at some forms of this that are current. The 10 Commandments are nailed to the cross. Well, obviously, if they're nailed to the cross, it's no longer so important whether we do them or not. And that is supported by twisting some scriptures in the New Testament. Another one, once saved, always saved. In other words, if you at one time in your life, you let Jesus take over your life, then you're in. You don't have to worry about it. And that also undermines obedience because the individual is not seeing the need to do what he says. Well, I don't know of anyone that teaches that in the Adventist church, but there's another one that is being taught by some. It is not possible to stop sinning. Now that's another sneaky way to say that the 10 Commandments are nailed to the cross, that once you're saved, you're in. Once your name gets on the Adventist list of members, you're safe. You come to church on Sabbath and pay your tithe, you're in. You don't have to worry about it. But that's the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. Let's look at a few promises that tell us that victory is possible. You remember what it said back there? That what it's doing is undermining what God can do for us, what he has the power to do. Jude 24 says, now unto him that is able to keep you from falling. Doesn't say he's able to get you into heaven even if you fall. It says he is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. Jesus will be able to say, I did it. I rescued them. They were able to let me help them so they could obey and do what is right. And he's going to have a lot of happiness and a lot of joy. And we will too, but it won't be any credit to us. Only that we trusted him, that we believed that he could do it. And as we believe that he could do it, he was able to accomplish it. In Hebrews 8:6, it tells the secret, 6 and 10, but now hath Jesus obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant. So the old covenant was not a good one. But Jesus, due to his death on the cross, is mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. So the thing that makes it work are the promises that he gives us. But before we look at it, let's look at the promises of the old covenant in Exodus 19, verse 5 and verse 8. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. And what did the people think? And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. Just like a child, the mother finds the child in the cookie jar, and they've been strictly forbidden to not do that. And they say, I'll never do it again, never. Yeah. But the problem is, they do not know the strength of temptation. And anyone that thinks that they can do it will be disappointed. But, as we say sometimes, we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yes, we want to get rid of the bathwater, and with all the human promises, get rid of those. But we also need to trust in God's promise. So here's why we can do that. Hebrews 8:10. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind. What does that mean? He will create a desire to obey. He will create the love of obedience. It's no good to say, well, I'm supposed to do this, so I'm going to do it. You know, I wish I didn't have to, but I'm going to do it because I don't want to be lost. That is still going in your own steam. That's not going to succeed. But if you ask the Lord, please write your law in my heart. And part of what needs to be written is that money is not the issue. Possessions are not the issue. The issue is, do we have a chance to serve God? Do we have a chance to finish the work on earth? Is that that only can come from God. He has to create that in us, but he's willing to do it. He says, I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts. He can make it to where you don't like those temptations. That you see a woman that's not dressed properly, you turn the other way. You just are not interested in all those things. And so the Balaams among us will not be able to accomplish their objective because we have his law written in our hearts. Can it be done? Well, Abraham did it. Genesis 26:5. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So he did it. Did he did it in his own strength? No, we see what he did in his own strength. He lied twice. He picked the wrong person to be the heir twice. And he fell. But at the end, he made it. He was able to keep the laws, and this is at the end of his life that God says this, that Abraham kept my commandments, he kept my statutes, and he kept my laws. And here we have a whole group of people called the 144,000 at the end of time, plus others that also have this happen. Revelation 14:12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God. A whole group of people that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So it's guaranteed, if we accept what the Bible says, that it can be done. And no matter what temptations we have, and no matter who tries to tempt us and make it more likely that we will fall, we do not have to yield to those things. And so may God help us. We're fully in the sexual problems of the Adventist church. It may get worse, but we're fully in there. We've been in there for quite a while. And so God is wanting to rescue us from all this so that we can be a part that will succeed in obeying the commandments of God through his involvement in our life.